So thank you so much. Hello, everyone. And it's, of course, a real pleasure to be here with you today. So as Ruth said, I'm a professor at the EHESP School of Public Health. So I'm talking to you from Rennes in the Brittany region. So what I can see from all the participants today participating, I'm quite sure that we're from different parts of the world, of course, and it's quite clear that our lives are certainly different. But there's definitely one thing that we certainly have in common that we share, and it's our interest in community health work. And I'd like to say that when we just had a presentation from the president of the IUHPE. And the IUHPE is really a very important voice for practitioners and researchers in community health work. So, I mean, you should definitely connect with this organization and stay, of course, connected with us as we are trying, like you do in your part of the world, to advance the practice of community health. So for this presentation, I will basically set the ground for the topic, the sheer topic. So I'm talking, of course, about community resilience. The first thing I want to say is we've all heard stories of people who made it through major hardships and who basically beat the odds against them. You can think of accounts of people who survive repeated violence, sexual violence, that lost many people they're basically survivors of many deaths around them, who spent months and sometimes years being homeless, who lived in fears due to armed conflicts. So there's all those stories that are quite amazing, that you see people that they could not only survive through those hardship, but also actually strive and live good lives. Yet in most cases, when you look at those stories, they only consider resilience as some individual victories. And they are about celebrating some personal attributes. So we'll celebrate their capacity to keep their optimism, their hope, their capacity to make meaning out of what happened to them, or their capacity to express gratitude to life. But the thing is, this individualistic perspective is pretty much oblivious to the essential contribution of the social environment of the persons who demonstrated resilience. There's clearly a role that was played by the family, the friends, and the communities. That family definitely played some role in fostering the resilience of individuals or friends or whatsoever. So I'd like to talk about resilience and the role of environment in fostering resilience. Maybe you know about Antonovsky, who is the father of the salutogenic orientation. So it's an author that is very much talked about in health promotion work. So Antonovsky actually had a very interesting demonstration of the role played by the social environment in what makes people cope with tragedies. So he studied a group of women who survived the Nazis' death camps during the Second World War. And he explained how among these women, this group of women they were actually studying, some were actually able to fare better in old age than what was predicted by most theories on post-traumatic syndrome. And part of the reason they were faring better in coping with the trauma was that when they were young girls, before they entered the camp, they had actually parents, they had relatives or other adults who took care of them, who were always proving them that they were loved, that their very existence were actually important. So when facing the horrors committed by the Nazis, they could always hold on the conviction that in no way they deserve being treated this way, that these adults were just basically animals. So the other young girls who had a life of neglect signed the camp, basically a confirmation that this is what life is about. And sadly, this experience just further eroded their sense of self-worth, and they were left living a life trying to process the horror of their time in the camp. So if we accept the fact that individual resilience is at least to some extent, the resulting action of collective forces, we then should invest more in improving the resilience of communities. So that brings me to talk about it, to look at the definition of resilience. So as you can see, if we ask what is resilience, from this definition, resilience is basically about capacities to maintain, to reorganize. There's mentions also of function. When we think of function, we think of the capacity to receive and give affection, of course, we receive and give love, take care of our children, spouses, parents, capacity to get food, to sleep well, to entertain and have leisure activities, and so on and so forth. So when you look at it, events like an economic crisis that generates massive job cuts will definitely test the resilience of the population and the function that are actually normal in a human life. So the question, of course, is whether we can do something about community the resilience. So clearly, if one can prevent tragedy from happening, this should definitely be done by all means. We want to avoid tragedy, of course. But the thing is, no society can accurately predict the next catastrophe in line. So most of us did not see coming the economic crisis of 2008. We didn't see coming as well the impact of a virus that we never heard of emerging from a small region of China. But yet, when you look at both events, they both had a massive impact on the physical, psychological, economic, and political health of our nation. So we cannot predict much. I mean, we can predict to some extent, but not to the extent that really we could preserve ourselves of any crisis. So as we meet today, human-induced global warming, and Siani did mention that, the same with Laurent Chambaud. So global warming is wrecking the world climates that generate extreme weather events. You can think of floods, bushfires, heat waves, droughts, tornado. All these are actually happening now. Today, I'm sure in many parts of the world, people are actually facing those events. So, and those events are stretching to the limit, the capacity of adaptation of many populations. I should also, of course, and this was mentioned before as well, armed conflicts that destroy people's lives and also force them to flee war zones. But all these instances of catastrophes and crises, community health workers can make things easier for population. I really think that community health workers have a role to play to make things easier. So make those events, make the population more readily capable of finding ways to manage and cope with the crisis, and also to get back on their feet once the worst is over. This is what resilience is about. It's about being able, once the worst is over, to get back on our feet. So, and for this, I'll use the work done by DeMelo and our colleagues to answer the question. I mean, DeMelo there are colleagues from New Zealand as well. So this morning is really an important contribution from New Zealand. So, and the question that she asked with the colleagues, how can communities be made stronger? So when something evil it's them. So they are more likely to rebound and so display their resilience. And so de Mello and our colleagues, they develop what you see here, the safety model of resilience building for community. And as you can see here in the model, there are 4 pillars on which rests the safety net. So I'm going to use a number of examples to show what we mean by those pillars. So the first pillar is social connectedness, and basically, whatever we do as community health workers, the first thing we need to do is to improve connections between the inhabitants of a territory and governmental agencies, NGOs. This is key in building resilience. So what is at stake with those connections is the capacity of community to identify and mobilize the resources. If you keep if you have a large set of resources and those resources are isolated, they're not connected, they are useless. I mean, you can have people that are very talented with many resources, but if they don't actually mobilize those resources and connect them with others, it it's not helpful. And so, and on that, I have to mention that Viola Cassetti, and I think she's actually among the participants today, has contributed greatly to this workshop, and she has a lot to say about the importance of connecting the assets of community. She's one of our voices from the field contributor. So what we can find basically many examples of community health workers that are engaging in improving the network of relationships within a community. When you look at, I see the case of France, of course, that I know better than any others. We have in France, the central and regional governments are definitely trying to improve the mobilization and management of local resources. So, I mean, to mobilize those resources so communities can better address the multiple determinants of population health. And the thing is, when you have complex problems, such as global warming, I mean, adaptation to global warming, teenagers dropping out from schools, you can think of poverty, violence, all those very complex problems, they cannot be solved without the collective effort of different sectors of the society. So when people are more closely connected, they can not only find new innovative solutions because they can connect resources, so they can not only find new innovative solutions to the problems, but they also can identify issues that were unknown to the many. If people are more connected, they have a much better sense of what's going on in the community. That is extremely important. So what you see in this figure that we have here on the screen it's the connections between the people that were mobilized as a result of a local health policy in France again. So what we found is that prior to the mobilization, there was a number of NGOs, public agencies that actually did not know each other or know very little of each other's. And as a result, there was sometimes resources that were wasted because, I mean, you had the same actions that were repeated by different organizations that were actually not talking to each other. So when we think about those connections, they can be developed not only through a health policy, they can be developed through many different venues. You can think of everything that is done to organize sports and leisure activities. If you have in a community sports and leisure activities that are organized, you have people who are connected. If you have a community that organizes once in a while a special celebration. I mean, you have the street that is blocked by, for the that is for the block for the cars. So it's only the pedestrians that can be there. There is food and everything. There's songs and whatsoever. I mean, the organization of this kind of activities will be an opportunity to improve connections. People will get to know better. I mean, we have cases in France where we had quite a serious heat waves in the early 2000. And that heat waves killed many people. And what we realized is that those people were so isolated that actually nobody knew that, I mean, in many cases, people didn't know they were actually living all by themselves. If you have some kind of fete that are organized, you have better chances of getting people connected to know each other and to actually pay attention to what's going on in the neighborhood. So that's an important thing. The second pillar is the one of the provision of knowledge and skill building services. So in that, training programs are important. You need a community where all the local stakeholders, I mean, you develop partnerships between the stakeholders and you train them. You get them to reflect on a number of problems, but you need to improve their skills. And those skills, those training programs are also really interesting opportunities for people to meet and know each other and to get basically some kind of a clear common sense of what's going on in the place, I mean, in the community, and what the problems are and the kind of solutions that are offered. The third pillar is the communications tools. And the thing is, you can have the best network you want. You need communication tools. You need a way to make the information circulate within the network. And on that, you can those communications tools. I mean, the best one you'll get, they are, of course, widely used. So people are using them all the time, and they're used for different purposes. It's an interesting example I found. I mean, in the war in Ukraine, I mean, Ukrainians, they had already a lot of communication tools. I mean, they had Telegram, they had, I mean, some mobile apps they were using, and the government was actually advertising a number of services through so they had apps that were actually used on a daily basis by people if they wanted to know what kind of cultural events there were, what kind of so how they can actually access some kind of government services. They could use those apps, but those apps now they also use to actually get people to know, to warn people when there's air raid. I mean, there are missiles incoming. They're used to actually develop, I mean, solutions so people can actually, cope with the war. So this is the kind of tools you need at some point. Doesn't have to be, I mean, you shouldn't have tools that are only through the web. You can have a board, I mean, an announcement board, I mean, on the street that is recognized as the place to go if you seek information, be it, I don't know, it could be for childcare. You need information about if there's someone who if you need transportation, you can consult this board. So those tools, communication tools, are important, okay? The fourth pillar is to prioritize those partnerships. In France, we said at the pandemic, we had those very nice local partnership, but with little resources that were actually provided by the government. And the fact is, when you have little resources, I mean, it means that the people who are actually managing the partnership, who are there, who are basically at the hub of the partnership that people turn to when they have questions. If they don't have, for instance, if they are not working for full time for that, if they don't have a place, some venues, some rooms where they can meet, when you have a crisis, for them, it's very difficult to answer to that. So we need to invest in those basically community partnership. And I'd say, I'm almost at the end, I'd like to say that community resilience is more and more actually recognized as an issue. When you look at in Europe, for sure, I mean, the WHO is definitely saying we need to do something on that. So health policies should really have something to say about community resilience. This should be an aim of health policies. Sorry. And to conclude, I hope I haven't been too long. I'd like to tell you that it's important. I mean, we had this discussion with Silvio van der Pilge, who's, as you see, the vice president of the Grand Customary Council of the Amerindian and Bushinange populations of French Guiana. And what he said, I found it was, you can see his testimony on the voices from the field. He said, you know, what we do usually is that when there's a problem, then we go and try to solve the problem. But the thing is, we need to adapt another stance. It's not always about working on problems. We need also to just try to make living conditions better. So we should be there on the long run, not just to be there. I mean, there's a problem, let's go solve it, and then that's over. We need to be there for the long run. This is really, for me, a key lesson I got from Sylvie.